the bullfrog-voiced cheap Texan, who had finally made something of herself out here in California. My mother. She knew everyone and everyone knew her. She was that person who would talk to any Tom, Dick, or Harry at the bar, then be in the kitchen cooking with the chef by closing. Jane was infamous. I and everyone else was just along for the ride. She picked up her Dr. Pepper without opening her eyes, took a sip, and put it back down precisely on the same ring spot it had just been pulled from. Next, the last drag of her menthol stick before she flicked it low and tripping into the pool. "What are you doing?" she asked me. "Nothing, I'm just looking for rattlesnakes. They bite, you know." "I know they do. I was careful and collected them by the tails. I put them all in the car." "No, you didn't." I walked toward our motel room to masturbate, pushed 2 pillows together, instant vagina. "It's too hot out here," I said, leaving. "It's never too hot," she retorted. I couldn't see when I walked into the room because the sun had been so bright it melted my corneas. I sat on the bed while the swamp cooler above me spit and clanked. Sweating, I grabbed the 2 pillows on the bed and stood up to go to the bathroom when I heard the door close. "Mom?" And then the sound of retching. "Are you okay?" More retching. "I have heat stroke." More retching. "Can I go get somebody?" "No, I just have to wait it out. You should lay out. You haven't gotten any sun." "You're throwing up because you laid out. Why the fuck would you want me to?" "Don't curse." "Sorry. Go get me my Dr. Pepper. The ice is going to melt out there. Better yet, go to the lobby and fill it with more ice." "Okay." I think about going in because that's probably what they do in the movie. I do. Inside it is dark. Men's shifty eyes dart back and forth. The blues and whites of the videos reflect off them. Some men hurry from one video cubicle to another. I step into a vacant one. I lock the door behind me. I press a crumpled dollar between my 2 palms to smooth it out, then feed it into the video machine. I have a son at home. Why am I here? I'm a fraud. I don't want to do this anymore. 4 screens come on the monitor. 4 different videos playing. On the upper left is a hefty black woman being double penetrated by 2 small white guys. Upper right is a woman by herself with a dildo that looks like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it's caked in green tie-dye colors. But I can only see the flat suction cup that's not inside her. The lower left video is so snowy I can barely make it out, but I think it's a bunch of silhouetted men with masks on, horse masks, trying to have sex, but also, together, attempting to create the sculpture of a horse by climbing on each other. And the last lower right is of 2 young men touching each other as numbers pop up on the screen telling me that I have limited time left. As I look through my pocket, I hear a knock on the door behind me, and at the same time, peripherally, I see something move to my right. I'm scared. I can feel it in my body. I wonder suddenly if the man wrapped in the green blanket is dead. There's a hole in the wall, a round hole, and a huge penis protruding from that hole, hanging there, pulsing in little heartbeats. Is Gus Van Sant going to find me in this booth? Why the fuck am I here? I want to be a good actor. I want to have all the experiences of the world. I want to be a living encyclopedia. I feed the next dollar into the machine. I hear the knock again behind me. I open the door. There is a man. He nods like he wants to come in. I shake my head and start to close the door, but he puts his hand against it. I'm stronger than he is. I push it until it locks. When I turn around, the penis through the hole is gone, and left is the strobing potpourri of lights from the video screen. There's another knock at the door. I'm back at the Flophouse. There are hookers and junkies here. I listen to them, afraid but intrigued. I'm reading a parenting magazine. There is screaming. It keeps happening, but I refuse to check. It's a man screaming. If it were a woman, I'd check it out, but it's a man screaming in a woman's voice, so no. I leave tomorrow. I realize what I've done here is useless. Mr. Van Sant was never going to discover me. I have no connections to these people. I'm not special. I'm not Matt Dillon. I'm the father of a 2-year-old. I have this smell on me now, and I don't want to take it home. ¿Tienes dinero? I don't want to lose sight of her. No, I don't have any money. What? I don't have any. I feel a slap on my stomach. I look down and see the blood start to creep out from between my fingers. I look up at him and see his wild eyes. He's on something. His eyeballs are shaking. They are visibly shuddering. He holds a knife, and the knife has blood covering the top half of the blade. He's stabbed me. He's fucking stabbed me. The yell I hear is as if someone else is yelling it. It's the yell of someone who knows they're going to die. Run! She looks back at me. I have to get to her. She looks at me, smiling. She doesn't know what's going on. She thinks my yell is a joke. I look down at what was my white shirt, and the bottom half is now saturated in vermilion red. Every day she wore dirty white, an off-white blouse, and the heat coming in an open window from the typically humid summer afternoon would find it translucent. He wouldn't focus on her pants or her shoes, but the pants he thought were the type of polyester where the butt is embraced sternly by the fabric in a perpetual squeeze like in those old Life magazine advertisements in the 1970s. He had a young boy at home and a sex-obsessed wife. He'd write long letters on postcards to them, 12 to 16 postcards long, that they would have to piece together after they had all arrived at different times out of sequence. Email didn't exist yet. Cell phones were as heavy as bricks. He mostly spent his time alone, but would sometimes venture into the night hoping to meet someone along the way. He was shy, and most of his energy went into imagining the way things should transpire in a life. One night while he was there, he passed a small cafe deep into an alleyway he had never been down before. His head hung down as he walked. The dog shit on the streets assaulted his nostrils, and the scent of unwashed men clouded his imagination. Then suddenly, as hissing sounds from a steaming espresso machine gave room to romance, he was caressed by the scent of her perfume, dazed by it, which made his feet stop. He turned to see her, nuzzled deep in a corner of the cafe, white with a thin dress, hair up in a bun, eyes focused on something that lay on the table before her. He walked in and sat as close to her as he could find an open seat. There was a lot of as-if living back then if without some drink, an aspiring writer who didn't understand words yet and only fucked older women because he knew they'd welcome it like a snapping turtle does a sprig of lettuce. He preferred walking in the dark and passing under the occasional neon that warmed his head. The smell of the streets rose from below his feet of day-old beer and urine from the lively urethras of the slap-happy, highly sexed dilettantes, and it sat in the nostrils and lungs like a hope of what the night might have brought them, but not him. In class the next day, he thought he should know the teacher's name, the Frenchwoman in her 50s who was doing her best to instill in her students an understanding of how important the French language was, the way she teed off a vowel and how it would easily roll along the pink of her mouth until the vowel landed in its proper place. He watched her, but he never really listened to what she was saying. There were other people in the room, but not as far as he was concerned. In a moment, the teacher looked at him and asked him a question in French. He became nervous and felt the heat of his voice stuck inside his throat. He looked down while she walked up to him and grabbed his hand. He was startled by her touch. His hand in hers continued to move, and he extended his arm. Under her dress it went, and the wet of her flesh spoke to him. He looked up to her, unsure as to what she might be asking of him. She looked into his eyes and pulled him to stand, and mischief controlled the room. The rest of the class stood too, and in single file walked out of the classroom, the last person out shutting the door behind them. She brought him over to the desk and turned to face him. He felt relaxed now, and able to investigate the light green of her eyes. She told him to sit down on the desk, and he did. He felt himself now, as she straddled his bent, dangling legs. He felt a confidence he had never felt, on top of a world that was now his to do with what he had been too afraid to take hold of before then. The ink was slow to dry in his mind, and the words that he caressed fell onto the pages where his life was spent in a better bubble. I was staying in the El Camino, sadly not there any longer, but replaced with a hipper, more disinfected motel, with some other flaccid contemporary name like Inn on the Walk. Everyone who lives here knows the coming of that ominous Bermuda cloud of Venice Beach off the boardwalk, when things get just a little more severe and all the tourists fly home and the locals are left to feed off each other's ferocity. We are what the Lower East Side of New York used to be, and the worst of what Florida has always been. I will never leave here, this depth in the sewer of what will always have originals stamped on its back alley asshole, and where there will always be, just for $1.25, an oily slice of pepperoni and a medium Coke waiting for you. And as you eat it, some stray will ask you if you have a can of spray paint because he just got an idea, and I'll know I'm home. That all of the other shit is just some Nobu Fantasyland smut with a thin slice of jalapeno on its sushi and a roofie waiting patiently in some yuppie's non-alcoholic beer. Her 3-year-old sister rolls in innate wonderment around the bingo basket of her mind, weighing, comparing, mathematically assessing the alchemy of it all. Then she climbs it, basks in it, befriends, then rejects it. She is a woman of movement. Sister and sister. They are a powerful duo. They sing through what has become together a different instrument, and it is a song beautifully attuned to what my ears prefer, a music that caresses my heart like Yo-Yo Ma's cello or Pavarotti's arias have. And with all romantic bullshit aside, it does me right, their personal ties. Strong, brilliant, brave, adventurous, absurd, funny, creative, impassioned, sensitive, and those unique qualities of ownership, respect, and a lack of pandering to please others. To be gifted with these 3 girls and a boy is beyond thanks. It's like a divine intervention that slapped the ego out of my self-absorbed youth. The idea touches me every couple of years of some Italian life in my 70s, involving books, chess, wine, a young, beautiful woman slowly making the sign of the cross on themselves in front of a Medici fountain as the perspiration of an August heatwave caresses their cleavage. But then it passes. 2009? My name is Barbara, she said to me as she reached out her hand. Actually, that's a lie. I don't remember the first time we met. I'm bad like that. I don't remember the first time we met, but I had heard of her from my mother years before. I would have liked to have met your mother. I think we would have gotten along, it sounds like, she said invitingly. They would have loved each other, my father exclaimed. In fact, my mother had actually met Barbara in Sun Valley, Idaho years before. They were both visiting Clint Eastwood, where he owned a home. My mother had known Clint and his then-wife Maggie since my mother ran away from Corpus Christi, Texas at 19 years old. They were the first people she met. I think it was around 1958, just before Clint had gotten rawhide. I think you guys had met. No. I remember I had seen a photo of all of them together, and I remember my mother telling me that Barbara was tough. It didn't matter. We've gone through decades spouting the good graces that could have transpired from the coming together of those two. The reality is they would have hated each other. I'm convinced of that. Tough people almost always hate other tough people, unless one has let their guard down. But I've always liked tough women. It's an Oedipal thing, I'm sure, so the next step was to get rid of my dad. No, I like my dad, so that wasn't an option. She was my pop's girl, and we were all going to live happily ever after. That was it. That was the ticket. Well into our happy ever after, I walked into their house one day. I'll have a glass of wine, I said. She looked at me and cocked her head, so I repeated myself. I'll have a glass of red wine, please. She took a slow breath, then hit me with it. Aren't you an alcoholic? It was a pretty ballsy thing to say. Yeah, I knew her for a while already. She was my dad's wife now, and he was really in love with her, and from what I could tell, so was she with him. Aren't you supposed to not be drinking? Man, there it is again. She always had a way of washing her tongue with a bullshit cleanser before she talked with me. My own mom was like that. So it didn't paralyze me, but my own mom was dead, so this was going to have to do. It's fine, it's just a glass of wine, I tried to justify. I don't think you're supposed to drink anything, right? A couple of years ago, she had come all the way to Prescott, Arizona to visit me. I was landscaping at that point. I'd quit acting. Fuck acting, I had hot-headedly concluded. I'd sworn off TV anyway. I hated the pace. And I was trading stocks for income, so I didn't, in case, need the acting. I was raising 2 kids, dealing with a ranch that had been left to me without a dime having been paid on the loan that built the house, and I was drinking. Hi. She had given me a hug. I walked out of the Prescott house into the parking area and walked into the hug. Then I hugged my father. Why don't you tie your shoelaces? I looked down through my long, uncombed hair. I didn't tie my shoelaces because I was still in the frame of mind that I wasn't going to do anything that was expected of me. It started with no bullshit with her, and it'll end with no bullshit. That's what I've always appreciated most in anyone, no matter how much my own enemy I was.